Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Type V3 and the God of Thunder has arrived. This is Figma's interpretation of the mighty Thor, based on Chris Hemsworth's appearance in Marvel's The Avengers. In true Asgardian fashion, Figma Thor is gorgeously regal, and all it takes is one glance to realize this is a premium toy. The biggest contributing factor to the presentation is simply that all of the figure's aspects have been emphasized in some way. The metallic armor has been given dark, almost rust-like lining. The navy undersuit's been done in a flatter plastic to resemble leather, with included wrinkles in the obvious spots. Moreover, all the small molded-in details have been slightly raised, giving Thor that layered look. Coloring is spot on with no major complaints, and the 6.5-inch silhouette screams superheroic. However, there are a couple visual issues present. Firstly, being a Figma, the elbows and backs of the knees look strange due to the bulbous nature of the standard Figma joint, though their coloring helps minimize the distraction. The biggest issue by far is the abdomen. It's bizarrely elongated, and the huge joint cut isn't helping the situation either. I would have rather seen the length of the legs extended as opposed to what Max Factory has opted for. When it comes to the head sculpt, Thor's is decent. I like the extra shading on the hair, but the length is a tad short. As for the face, it looks exactly like Chris Hemsworth, if he were in an anime. So, while it could be better, it's recognizable enough. Also, I think his eyes could have used some pupils. Now, while this Figma doesn't come with any other expressions, the face does have one special feature: posable eyes. On the back side of the faceplate are two knobs that each control the eye direction. Of course, moving them with your fingers may be tricky, so included is a special tool to help out. It's a neat gimmick and one I'd like to see in more Figmas. For articulation, Thor has a ball hinge neck, and there is even a hinge at the base of the neck so he can go further upwards. The back of the hair actually is on two ball joints, so these can actually move out of your way when you're moving around the head, which is a really nice feature. As for the torso, there is a waist cut. There's this huge ab cut right here, and then there's a ball joint at the torso, which in turn gives you some amazing torso crunch and reverse torso crunch. And as for this little piece here, it's actually a thin little piece of plastic, so you can make that weird torso look even longer because you can lower his crotch and extend that gap right there. So I don't know why they did it like that, but it's just one of those things that I found weird. Arms are simpler than you'd expect. There is only a ball joint, a sort of hinged ball joint at the shoulder, and there is no bicep cut, but the inside of the shoulder joint has this huge opening, so you can actually turn his arm all the way in and out like that. So that's pretty decent. Good range of motion up and down. The chest armor does hinder how much he can get his arms in front of his chest. The Figma joint in the elbow is really good with range, and you have a Figma jointed wrist, so that's pretty good. The legs are also simple. It's just a ball joint right at the torso, but they're connected on a sort of hinged T-joint, so they rock back and forth together. Now, the actual crotch section kind of limits how far you can kick forward. It's a soft material, and it does tend to bunch up the more you try and push that joint, but it can't really go too far. Outward movement is pretty good. The single Figma jointed knee is very good. And then, of course, you have the ankle with a Figma joint with a little bit of rocking motion and a toe joint. Generally speaking, Figma Thor can pose well enough. It's probably one of, if not the most articulated Figma to date. Yet, it's still missing key components to be on level terms with rival toy lines such as SH Figuarts. For accessories, we'll start with hands. Fists and open palms are your main options for display purposes, and these can easily be switched out via a simple peg connection. Next are a pair of worthy gripping hands whose purpose is solely for wielding Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir. It's a beautifully crafted accessory, and despite being comprised entirely of plastic, it looks like it's been made from metal and wood. The strap on the end is a bit forgettable, though. Then there's Thor's cape. It's a thin, cheap piece of fabric cut out in the proper shape. Exercise caution with this cape as it's easily susceptible to stretching, fraying, and tearing. Attaching it to Thor is a minor task. First, you take off his plastic mantle, then take the included pegs, thread them through the holes on the cape, and then peg everything onto the figure's shoulders. It may look fine, but the big issue here is that the original plastic cape piece has trouble sitting underneath the front chest plate, like how it's seen in the promo shots. You can always force everything lower, however, this does risk tearing the cape altogether. The whole thing is such a disappointment in both implementation and execution. Finally, as with every Figma, included in the box is a display stand and an accessory bag. Figma Thor is, without doubt, the very best 6-inch scaled figure of the character. Marvel fans and Thor diehards are sure to love it. It doubles as both a magnificent display piece and a highly articulated collectible toy. While the cape is lackluster, the brilliance of Mjolnir more than makes up for it. It's a figure I would almost recommend impulse buying if you're even slightly interested. Almost. Why? Because Figma Thor retails for a ridiculous $65. Even though Figma prices have slowly been on the rise in the past year, Thor still manages to cost a substantial amount more, and there's no obvious justification for it. More inclusions like a spinning hammer or lightning effect parts would have helped ease the high cost. Thing is, it's a pretty bare bones release at best. Bottom line, Figma Thor doesn't feel worthy. In fact, it just feels like another average Figma. But that's all for me. Thanks for watching, and while I haven't been entirely let down by Figma Thor, I'll admit my excitement for the remaining team has subsided. Let's hope for more from the Golden Avenger.